Okay, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whatever time it is that you are watching this video. This is the continuation of the first video that I uploaded in support of our module in, Philippine literature in our subject. So far we have already talked about the first topic. Last time we traced the development of Philippine literature through the different periods in our history, how it has developed, how it has changed, and how it has evolved through time. So we discussed different kinds of prose and poetry, the religious poems, the religious prose, secular dramas, things like those. Please refer to the first video and to the first part of your module if you want to review this topic. This time we're going to focus on contemporary literary forms. When we say contemporary, this refers to the present time, the current time. So we are no longer referring to a specific genre, but we are going to talk about all of them in general. We are going to talk about poetry first. No? So we'll talk about poetry. Well, as you can see, poems are literary attempts to share personal experiences and feelings. That is one of the first reasons why versifiers or poem writers or poets write, to express themselves and to share their experiences and emotions about things, about life, about people, about events. Sometimes a poet may write about the personal life, the lives of those around him, people he loves, sometimes even people he hates. Depende sa gusto niyang sulating tula. In other words, poems are expressions of a poet's views about things in general, how he feels about them, what he thinks about them. And he expresses all of these in beautiful language. Poems often probe deeply and can contain disturbing insights. They are disturbing in the sense that they do not really terrify us, no. They are disturbing because they are new. Sometimes they tend to drive us to question things, to get new perspectives about things, about the world we live in, about our experiences. They can be disturbing because they tend to disrupt what we have always thought about life, about the world, and about people. So poems can be disturbing. No? Sometimes they can also be, or most of the time even, they can be enlightening. No? We learn a lot about the world and about people, about life in general from poems. So that's one thing we get from poetry, aside of course from the fact that good poems are always stated in a fresh manner. So we are entertained and at the same time we learn from poems. The language can be subtle, meaning it's not direct. Sometimes a poet can mean something opposite of what he is actually saying. He uses a lot of images to express thought, or an idea or an emotion. And the discovery of these images, the discovery of the connection between these images and the emotion or the idea gives us a sense of delight, sometimes even awe and wonder. So let's talk about the following elements of poetry. These elements will help us understand a poem. Understanding these elements will enable us to appreciate poetry better. We'll be able to go deeper into the poem. We will get deeper insights into poems if we know how to appreciate and understand these different elements. So the first one is the poetic line, which is the basic unit of composition in poems. As already mentioned in the first video, the poetic line is the basic unit of composition in poems. We read lines, we have lines in poetry as we have sentences in prose. We have stanzas in poetry as we have paragraphs in prose. We write a line, we write another line, we write one more line, depending upon the number of lines we want to have in a stanza. We put them all together, we get a stanza. We put the stanzas together, we get a poem. In prose, we write a sentence, we write another sentence, we write another sentence, we put them all together, we get a paragraph. We write another paragraph, we write another paragraph. What we get is prose. What we get is an essay, a biography, a novel, a short story, an autobiography, maybe even a drama. No? So that's one of the basic differences between poetry and prose. Their basic unit of composition. So usually in poetry, an idea or feeling which is expressed in one line is frequently continued into the next line. Very seldom can we see a poem with only one line. Although there are poems which are composed of only one line. Meron ngang isang poem. I think it's by Garcia Villa. No? The title is The Bashful One. That's the title. And below that, you will see nothing except a comma. Comma, yung punctuation mark, comma. No words, no lines, no stanzas. All you see below the title is a comma. The bashful one. Then below that, you see a comma. You cannot even read it as a comma. Kasi punctuation mark siya, hindi naman siya word eh. Yung comma nga. So that's his style as a poet, no? But generally, no, poems are made up of stanzas. Stanzas are made up of lines. So the poetic line, to repeat, is the basic unit of composition in poems. So we should understand each line as possible, because if we miss the meaning of a line, we may miss the meaning of the entire poem. Every word, every line, every nuance of expression in poetry is important. Unlike in prose, no, we can still appreciate, say for example, you can still understand and appreciate a short story or even a novel, even if we do not understand a lot of words in them. We can still appreciate and understand them because we understand the story in general, the general flow of the story. But in poetry, as much as possible, we should understand every word, every line. Especially so that every line in a poem is connected to the next line or the previous line or other lines in the poem. So that's one, the poetic line. No? The first element of poetry. Itong mga elements, kumbaga ito sa luto, these are the ingredients. No? Say for example, you want to cook adobong manok. Well, you will need the first thing you will need is a chicken, no? Kailangan mo ng manok. Mahirap mag-adobo ng manok nang walang manok. So kailangan mo ng manok. So hintayin mong umalis muna yung kapitbahay para para magkamanok ka. What else do you need? So you will need cooking oil, you will need garlic, you will need onions, at yung iba pang mga ingredients. Kailangan mo ng toyo at saka vinegar. So you put them all together and process them. What you get in the end is adobong manok. Ganon din dito sa poetry. You will have certain ingredients or certain elements. The first of which is poetic line. Hindi ka pwedeng walang poetic line. In the same manner na hindi ka pwedeng mag-adobo nang walang mantika or walang toyo or lalong-lalo walang manok. So that's the first element, the poetic line. Then we also have the sound of words. As already mentioned before, in poetry, words are used more artistically, more aesthetically, more imaginatively than in prose. And the poet takes advantage of the beautiful sounds that words produce. He chooses and organizes his words into a pattern of sound that is a part of the total intensified meaning. That is the reason why it is always best not to just read a poem silently, but to read it aloud, so that aside from the ideas conveyed by the words, we can also hear the actual sound of the words, the actual rhythm, the actual pattern of sounds that they create as they are stringed together or put together by the poet. In some instances, in some poems, the meaning of the poem depends to a large extent not to the actual meaning of the words but to their sounds. Doon sa tunog ng words, not their meaning. Although of course the meaning plays a very important role here, but there are instances where the sound plays a larger role in the poem, especially with lyric poetry, where the words have really very high musical quality. So pag pinakinggan mo yung tula, even if it is just spoken plainly, para kang nakikinig sa isang kanta, no? It will sound like a song, lyrical poetry. So the sound of words are taken into consideration, very serious consideration by poem writers than by prose writers. Yan. Mamaya makikita natin how this works. The sound effects are the products of organized repetitions. They are the following. The first one is rhyme. Rhyme repeats similar sounds in some apparent scheme. If we will go back to the examples of poems in our previous lesson, you would notice that the sound of words in the end, specifically the terminal syllables, the last syllables of the lines, they sound similar to one another. They resemble each other in sound. Magkakahawig-hawig sila ng tunog sa dulo. That's what we call rhyme. Hindi ko lang pwedeng balikan dito sa aking presentation because it's in another file. Masisira itong ating video dito. Balikan nyo sa kwan ninyo. Balikan nyo sa inyong module. You will see magkakahawig ang tunog sa dulo. Yung Florante at Laura, Ibong Adarna, you go back to them and you will see that they have similar sounds in the end. That's what we call rhyme. No? Tumutugma ang mga tunog sa dulo ng mga lines. We call that rhyme, which falls under sounds of words. Iba naman itong rhythm. This is the result of systematically stressing or accenting words and syllables. Rhythm. In songs, there's rhythm. In music, there is rhythm, no? So, halimbawa, nagbibidyoke ka, you have to sing according to rhythm. You have to follow. You have to keep in time with the rhythm. Otherwise, you will be left behind by the music, or you will sing ahead of the music. So, hindi magandang pakinggan, no? Kung may nagkakaraoke, nauna sa music, or he is being left behind, no? By bali ni balibangon. In poetry, how is rhythm created? If you will notice, class, words have accents, stress or accent, stressing or accenting words and syllables. Ano itong stress or ano itong accent? Say for example, sa pangalang hindi ko ma-memorize yung mga pangalan ninyo eh. Isip tayo ng ibang pangalan. Halimbawa, Fernando. O, kunyari, si Fernando po Jr. Fernando. How many syllables do we have in that name? Fernando. Tatlo, no? Fernando. We do not say the name in a monotone. We do not say Fernando. We say it with proper accent or stress. We say Fernando. Fernando. So you will notice that the voice is raised a little bit higher in sandun sa tatlong syllables natin, medyo tinataas natin ang ating boses. Fernando. We raise our voice a little bit on the second syllable, dun sa nan. We do not say Fernando. We do not say Fernando. We say Fernando. Our voice is raised a little bit higher on the second syllable, which is nan. So we say that nan, the second syllable in the name Fernando, is stressed or accented. Say for example, in the word university, we do not say university. Because ito tadlungan, no? There are certain syllables, 1, 2, 3, 4, university. 5 syllables. There are syllable there that is a little bit higher than the others. We raise our voice a little bit on that syllable. So we say university. We do not say university. We do not say university. Hindi naman university. We say university. See? So, we say that the third syllable, ver. May dumaang motor. I don't know if you heard that. University. So, the third syllable is stressed or accented. Kung saan tumataas ng konti yung ating boses, where we put the emphasis, that syllable is stressed or accented. In choosing words for his poem, the poet takes into consideration the stressed and accented syllables of the words. He arranges these words in such a way that a specific pattern will be created. Whatever pattern is created results to the specific rhythm of the poem. The rhythm creates the music in the poem. So kapag nagsulat ng tula, tinitingnan niya ng mga poets. How do these words, halimbawa, gagawa siya ng first line. How do these words come together in terms of creating meaning, creating images, creating sounds, creating pattern, creating rhythm, creating music? The best arrangement of words in terms of those things mentioned, he chooses and writes the first line according to the pattern. See, pag nagsulat ng tula, hindi sulat lang ng sulat. No? Or if you are writing a song, ganyan ang rhythm. So let's proceed to the next. Alliteration. The use of or the repetition of initial vowels or consonants. So pag sinabing initial vowels or consonants, these are the first vowel or the first consonant of the word. Initially, adi siya yung nauna, siyang first. Initial vowel or consonants. Magkakapareho. Here's an example from Tennyson. He clasps the crags with crooked hands. Did you notice that? The repetition of the sound of C. Clasps. Crags. Crooked. He clasps the crags with crooked hands. Okay? You will also notice the similarity in sound. Hindi lang similarity, but it's really repeated, no? The sound of A in those words. Clasps, the sound of A. Clasps, crags. This is again repeated in hands. Hands. The A in clasps, the A in crags, and the A in hands are all the same. They are identical sounds. The repetition of these vowel sounds, the repetition of this initial vowel or consonant sounds is called alliteration, which is another element, another factor that makes poetry beautiful. Then we have assonance. This refers to the correspondence of vowel sounds. Vowel sounds. Correspondence, magkakatugma-tugma. Made in crowned with glossy blackness, long-armed maid when she dances. Notice the sound of the long A in maiden, maiden. That vowel sound is repeated in maid, maiden, maid. The A in blackness, black, black, is repeated in dance. A, black, A, dance. The sound of S in blackness is the same as the sound of S in dances. So, blackness, dances. So, sila'y nagra-rhyme. Meron pang assonance. The sound of O in glossy, glossy, is repeated in long, glossy, long. See? Correspondence of vowel sounds. I am sure we're not conscious of these things, not when reading poetry. We just say, for example, our attention is attracted to a poem. Our attention is caught by a poem. What we usually see in poems is the beauty of the words, no? The beauty of the lines. I don't know if we even pay attention to these vowel sounds, consonant sounds, assonance. Yung rhyme, very common din yan. We almost always expect the lines to rhyme. As a matter of fact, many people equate poetry with rhyme. Sa maraming tao, basta't nagtono sa dulo ang mga linya, poem na. However it is written. Okay, so remember we're talking about sound of words pa lang, ha? Sound of words. So, to review, we're talking about the contemporary literary forms. So, our number 1 is the poetic line. Number 2 is the sound of words. Under the sound of words, we have number 1, rhyme. Number 2, rhythm. Number 3 is alliteration. Number 4 is assonance. Number 5 is onomatopoeia. Yeah. It's a long word, no? But it simply means or refers to the imitation in words of natural sounds. The sound of the word is similar to the actual sound being described. Yung tunog ng salita ay kahawig mismo ng actual na tunog na dinidescribe. Halimbawa, the word hiss. It is similar to the actual sound of a snake. O di ba yung tunog ng ahas, pag may ahas, sabi ng ahas, hiss. O yung tunog ng word na hiss ay kahawig mismo nung actual na tunog ng ahas. Buzz. Halimbawa, mayroong buzzer. Usually, ang tunog ng buzzer is bzzz, which is similar to the sound of the word buzz. Buzz. Sabi ng cat, meow. Which is similar to the sound of the word meow. The cat's meow. Yung tunog ng salita, tunog mismo nung actual na sound ng pusa. Yan. Ang tawag natin dyan is onomatopoeia. Yan. Here's another example from Tennyson. Dry cast his harness in the icy caves and barren chasms, and all to left and right the bare black cliffs clanged round him. So there you are. The sound of the words clasped and clanged resemble the actual sound of things when they clasp or when they clang. Halimbawa, takip ng kaldero. You hit it with another object. No? Halimbawa ay ladle, liwag. So, pag tama nung ladle doon sa takip ng kaldero, sabi nila, klang! So, it is similar to the sound of the word clanged. The bare black cliffs clanged round him. Yan. Ang tawag natin dyan is onomatopoeia, which is another device used under sound of words. Then, let's proceed. We have meter. Letter C. Ba't nakarating tayo ng letter C? Ano ba ang letter A at letter B? Well, actually, ang letter A sana ay the poetic line. Kaya lang ang nalagay ko sa module ay number 1. So, the point here is, the first, whether it's 1 or letter A, is the poetic line. The second one, the sound of words, is the number 2 or letter B. Then letter C or number 3, basta siyang pang-tatlo, ay itong meter. So, I hope you follow, ha. Nagkamali lang ako sa numbering yan, but it should be number 3. So, basta siya ay pantatlo. Una ay poetic line, then sound of words, then ito, meter. Alright, let's talk about this. So, basahin ko muna. This is the regularized, and pattern rhythm. There are 4 conventional types of meter in poetry written in English, each being distinguished from the others by the number and accent of syllables. So, yan. Meter, parang sa music din, the equivalent in music would be a bar or a measure. Halimbawa, mayroon kang time signature na 3/4. So, in a measure or in a bar, you will have 3/4 notes or their equivalent. There, you have 1 meter. No, 1 measure or 1 bar. Kasi nakompleto na yung time signature, nakompleto na yung pattern. Sa music, mayroong time signature. Dito may meter, may pattern din. So, how is a meter formed or completed? If you have already completed the pattern, that's already 1 meter. Di ba kanina, just a while ago, we were talking about accented and unaccented syllables. Yung accented syllables, these are syllables on which we raise our voice a little bit higher, giving emphasis on them. Yung hindi tumataas ang boses natin, they are called unaccented syllables. Unaccented syllables. So, tingnan natin dito. First, we have the iambic meter. By far, the most popular and the most natural to English expression. Its basic unit or foot is 1 unaccented and 1 accented syllable. So yun ang tinatawag na iambic meter. You have 2 syllables in 1 meter. The first syllable is unaccented, and the next one, the second one, is accented. So pagkatapos ng dalawang yon, balik ka doon sa unaccented, accented. That's another meter. Then you have another pair of syllables. The first one is unaccented. The second one is accented. That's another meter. Tapos maulit yung pattern, ulit, unaccented, accented, that's another meter. Here's the example. Whose words these are, I think I know. So you will see that in this line, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 meters. Whose words, that's 1 meter. Bakit? Bakit 1 meter na siya? Because the pattern is already complete. Meron ka ng isang unaccented syllable, yung whose, at saka isang accented syllable, woods. So, whose woods, unaccented, accented, that's 1 meter because you have already completed the pattern. These are, pattern ulit, another meter. I think, pattern ulit, 1 meter. I know, pattern ulit, 1 meter. So you have 4 meters. And they are made up of 2 syllables each. The first, unaccented. The second syllable is accented. Hence, or that's what we call the iambic meter. Kapag ganyan ang pattern, 2 syllables each in its meter. The first syllable is unaccented. The second is accented. That's what we call iambic meter. The next is the trochaic meter. Parang kwan. The reverse, yung kabaliktaran. The reverse of iambic meter. Its foot contains an accented. You notice magkahiwalay ang an at saka accented. Its foot contains an accented and an unaccented an unaccented syllable. So, in the iambic meter, it's the first syllable that is unaccented. Dito, yung pangalawa naman ang unaccented. The accent is placed on the first syllable in a trochaic meter. So magbaliktad sila. Swift of foot was higher watha. You look at the pattern. Swift of, see, bumababa yung ating boses doon sa of, hindi tumataas. Swift, we put the accent on the first syllable. So the word swift, which is also one syllable, is stressed or accented. Then of is not. It's unaccented. Yan, trochaic yan. Swift of foot was here, watha. Here, watha. Then we have the anapest. Two unaccented syllables and one accented syllable. Baka meron nag-iisip na hamak ra kuno kala magsuyat kita at point magbinilang pa kita syllable kali ag mag taas boses, taas babat boses. Ganyan po talaga. That's what we do when we write poems. Naalala niyo yung ating discussion last meeting dun sa last video. Mayroong sina Florante at Laura, yung Ibong Adarna. Mayroong octosyllabic, mayroong dodecasyllabic. They really count the number of syllables, no? Especially those writers who still adhere to the time-honored of poem writing. Ngayon, yung mga poetry, yung mga modern ba, they do not put so much emphasis on these things anymore. They want to have more freedom in their poem writing. So they do not restrict themselves in fixed patterns. They do not confine themselves in strict number of syllables. No, they write the way they want to write, and that is also allowed. No? Kanya-kanyang pag-express yan. So what we are trying to say here is that if we encounter words, if we encounter poems that still adhere to the traditional method of poem writing, such as those that count the number of syllables, take into consideration the patterns, yung gumagamit pa rin ng mga iambic pentameter, mga trochaic meters, yung mga ganon, at least you will still be able to appreciate those poems. So we continue. So in the anapestic meter, we have 3 syllables per unit, per meter. So doon sa tatlong syllables, the first 2 are unaccented, walang accent. The third syllable, which is the last in the meter, is accented. Katulad ng, for the moon never beams without bringing me dreams. See? I'm trying to exaggerate the way I'm reading the line, no? So that we will see how the accents work. Parang napakapangit naman kung for the moon never beams without bringing me dreams. See, there's no beauty, there's no soul. Parang tumutulay, parang zombie, no? Alang kabuhay-buhay. So to appreciate poetry, as already mentioned just a while ago, we are advised to read it aloud, giving emphasis to the appropriate syllable, using the putting emphasis on the correct pattern or rhythm, so that we'll be able to appreciate the musical quality of the poem. We'll be able to hear and appreciate the music in the poem. For the moon never beams without bringing me dreams. So, at least meron siyang buhay. So that's the anapest, no? Three syllables per meter. The first two syllables are unaccented, and the third syllable is accented. The fourth one is the reverse or the opposite of the anapest. In a dactylic meter, it's the first syllable which is stressed or accented, and the remaining two syllables in the meter are unaccented. So tatlong syllables pa rin in 1 meter, but the accent has now been placed on the first syllable. Ay yung natitirang dalawa doon sa meter, sila ang walang accent. Reverse nga siya nung anapest. This is the forest primeval. See? Doon tayo tumataas ng boses. We put the stress, we put the accent on this. Kasi pangit naman kung this is the forest. Para bang yung mga nagdadasal ng mga tribo-tribo, abayga! Ganon. Are you familiar with that? Sige, practice kayo dyan. Practice kayo. So that's the dactyl, no? That's the dactyl. 3 syllables in 1 meter. The first syllable is accented. The second and the third are unaccented. That's the dactylic meter. Alright, let's talk about imagery, which is the fourth element of poetry. Letter D or number 4. Bakit letter D? Bakit pangapat na? Ano ba yung naunang tatlo? So, review natin. Hindi natin nakikita yung ating notes eh. So, the first one is the poetic line. Remember, we're talking about elements of poetry, no? The first one is, so ang gagamitin ko na lang dito is first, second, third, fourth. Bahala na kayong magpalit dyan kung number 1 or number 2 or letter A or letter B. So the first one is the poetic line. The second is the sound of words. The third one is meter. And the fifth is imagery. From the word image, no? Pictures. When we read poems, and we really plunge ourselves into it, we are able to conjure up mental pictures or visual images of whatever it is that the poet is describing. He may even call up in our memory, in our mind, certain sounds, certain textures, certain feel, even odors, and sometimes even tastes of food that we have experienced eating before. Say, for example, the pungent smell of certain ingredients can be recalled by the reader because of the choice of words by the writer. We can recall certain things that we have felt, whether they are rough to our skin, whether they are smooth. Sometimes we recall in our mind the fragrance of a particular flower when reading a poem. Dahil magaling talaga yung writer mag-describe, no? In poetry, imagery plays a vital role. Sabi nga natin kanina, in some instances, there are poems which do not express a specific meaning. All it wants to do is to describe something for the purpose of making the reader remember an image. Maybe an image that is common to all. Maybe childhood experiences that are common to all. Say, for example, you can simply describe a river, and many readers can relate to that. Because as children, most of us, if not all, have experienced going to the river, swimming in the river, playing in the river, doing something in the river. nakakita, naka-experience, nakaranas, pumunta, maligo, tumambling sa ilog. So, by just describing a river, those experiences will go back to their minds. And they will approach your poem according to their experiences with rivers. Somebody who has had a wonderful experience with rivers will remember those experiences. He or she will go back to those beautiful memories, those wonderful memories when they went swimming in the river. But to somebody who has had a traumatic experience in a river, ay ang maalala niya ay yung muntik na siyang malunod o hinabol siya ng buhaya. Lintik na poem ito. Naalala ko tuloy yung experience ko, hinabol ako ng buhaya kasi. So, depende yan sa experiences ng readers. The point I'm trying to make here, class, is that imagery is very important in poetry. Certain emotions, certain ideas, certain experiences can be conveyed through an image or through several images in the poem. Sabi nga ay, a picture daw, a picture can say 1,000 words. Yeah. If we can make the reader recall in his memory, a particular image or picture in his experiences, then the reader can relate to our poem in a certain way. No? Makaka-relate siya sa tula na sinusulat natin because the image is familiar to him. Maybe a river, a garden, a mountain, a place that's common to all. Mga playgrounds, lahat naman ng mga bata. Or if you are talking about experiences among adults, you can also use that technique, using images. So that's imagery. And then we have the tone. The tone refers to the overall attitude toward the subject. The writer's attitude toward the subject. What is the writer's attitude towards the subject? How does he treat the subject? Ano yung kanyang attitude? Ano yung kanyang approach towards the subject? Is he cheerful about it? Is he sad? Is he reflective? Para siyang nagninilay-nilay, no? Reflective, serious, angry, anxious, meaning there's a little fear, etc. Pwede ngang ang tone ay sarcastic. No? There are poems that are worded beautifully, but if you look at the meaning, the writer is really angry. Meaning, he is covering his anger with beautiful language. Why does he do that? Ganun po talaga sa poetry. We do not say things directly as possible. That's one thing that readers get from reading poetry. The joy of discovery. Sabi ng reader, ganun pala ang ibig sabihin ng writer. Ngayon ko lang nakuha. Yeah. So the tone, again, refers to the writer's attitude towards the subject. He may be very serious about it. He may be sad. So, say for example, the writer is talking about a previous experience that has left him sorrowful, sad and grieving. Yun, malungkot yung kanyang tula. So all of the elements will work together towards creating that tone, the choice of words, the rhythm or pattern, sometimes even the spacing of words. No? Mayroong mga tula na abang lalayo ng mga words from each other. Hindi ba yung normal na pag-type? Hindi double space ha, kundi malalayo yung mga words from each other. Halimbawa, in the first line, malalayo yung mga words. Sometimes poem writers, sometimes poets do that for certain effects. So pag babasahin mo siya, parang napipilitan kang bagalan yung pagbasa mo. No? We are forced to read the line very slowly. Yan. Meron mga ganyan. Technique yan ng mga writers. Kanya-kanyang style yung mga writers. So that's the tone, no? The overall attitude of the writer towards the subject. Pwedeng angry, no? Say for example, a writer who is writing a poem about something that makes him angry. Halimbawa, a poem about injustice, no? Yung kawalang katarungan. Say for example, a poem about invaders. A poem about foreign rulers in our land. A poem about evil. See, galit yung writer. We can feel that from the poem. Not only from the words, not only from the sounds, not only from the images, but the overall effect on us of the poem. So, in the end, we will feel the author's anger. And maybe even contaminated. Even his anger may even rub off on us. No? Parang mahahawa tayo doon sa kanyang galit. Okay. Pero siyempre, pwede rin hindi palaging galit. No? Pwede rin cheerful. Pwede rin may pagka-romantic yung tone. No? So for those of you who have received poems from, ipinagsusulat ba kayo ng poems ng mga jowa nyo? Ayun, romantic poems. The overall tone is romantic. No? Yung mga words ay may pagka-romantic. So you will find their words that will create that effect. Yan. So that's tone, which is the fifth element. Then we have figures of speech. Figures of speech. Yan, figures of speech. This is one of the devices used by authors to make their poems even more interesting, even more beautiful. The use of the different figures of speech. Kumbaga sa Filipino, ito yung mga matatalinghagang pananalita. Figures of speech. In poetry, language is more imaginative, more suggestive, more aesthetic, more artistically used. And it is made even more so through the use of the different figures of speech. So pag-usapan natin ito, what are these figures of speech that are very commonly used in poetry? The first is the simile. But we cannot say maila, that's simile. This is a comparison between two dissimilar objects by means of the words like, as, or as if. So comparison, paghahambing of two different objects with the use of words like, pwede rin gumamit ng as, pwede rin as if. So, paghahambing na gumagamit ng mga salitang like, as, or as if. That's simile. Here's an example. Serenity of mind poises like a gull swinging in air. So what are the two dissimilar objects? What are the two different objects being compared here? The first one, as you can see, is serenity of mind. Serenity, peace, peacefulness of mind, peace of mind. Serenity of mind. Katahimikan ng isip. Siya ay kino-compare sa, alam niyo kung ano yung gal? Itong taga-Balogo. Hindi, jokes lang. Gal. This is a kind of, correct, bird. Yan ay isang uri ng ibon, gull. Di ba may mga seagulls? Yan. So serenity of mind is being directly compared to a gull, to a bird. And the comparison is made direct with the use of the word like. Sa umpisa ng second line. Like a gull swinging in air. Serenity of mind poises like a gull swinging in air. So dalawang magkaibang bagay, serenity of mind at saka gull, pinagko-compare, pinaghambing with the use of the word like. That's simile. So if you are comparing, say for example, your friend to an angel, pag sinabi mong, my friend is like an angel. She's very kind. Yan. So you are comparing two different things. Two different entities. Your friend, that's one entity, and angel, that's another entity. Magkaiba sila. But you are comparing them directly using the word like. My friend dances as if he is performing on stage all the time. That is another. Basta nandoon yung like, as, or as if. Mayroong comparison between two dissimilar objects. Mayroong comparison between two different objects, persons, or entities. Simile yan. Simile. At pag walang like, or walang as if, or walang as, it becomes a metaphor. Tulad nito. Good books are food and drink to an avid reader. What are the two different things, groups of things that are being compared here? So on one hand we have good books. On the other we have food and drink. So yan ang metaphor. Comparison of two unlike objects. The comparison is implied. Hindi siya direktang sinasabi. Implied, yun ang ibig sabihin ng implied. Hindi direktang sinasabi. The comparison is not implied nor expressed. But we know, of course, that the speaker or the writer is comparing good books to food and drink. Dahil magkaibang bagay sila eh. Good books are food and drink to an avid reader. We do not see the words like, as, or as if here. Basta pinag-compare lang sila. Good books are food and drink to an avid reader. That's a metaphor. When I saw her smile, a stone rolled away from my heart. Wow. When I saw her smile, a stone rolled away from my heart. Ano yung pinagko-compare dito? The act of seeing her smile and the feeling of having a stone roll away from one's heart. So wala uling, parang mas appropriate itong hyperbole. So what's important to remember with metaphor is that the comparison is implied, not expressed. Wala kang makikitang words na like, as, or as if. Say for example, your father is very strict. So sabi mo, my father is a tiger. Metaphor yun because you are comparing your father impliedly to a tiger. So magkaiba yung father mo, magkaiba yung tiger. But you are comparing them without the use of like or as. That's a metaphor. Pero pag sinabi mong, my father is like a tiger, it becomes a, correct, it becomes a simile dahil nandoon na yung word na like. Madalas yan sa mga matatalinghagang pananalita. Even in Filipino, basa kayo ng mga tulang Filipino. Marami ang mga ganyan. Metaphor. Ano yung metaphor sa Tagalog? Kalimutan ko eh. Basta metaphor, ganyan. So, number 3 tayo. Under figures of speech, we have personification. In this figure of speech, an inanimate object or an abstract idea is given a human attribute or is considered to be a live being. Yung isang bagay na walang buhay, inanimate object, is given a human characteristic. It is given a human attribute. It is thought of as if it is a live being. Examples. At last, the wind sighed itself to sleep. What is that inanimate object that is being given a human attribute here? Yung isang bagay na walang buhay. If you answered wind, then you got it correct. What is the human attribute that is given to the wind, which is an inanimate object? If you guessed sighed itself to sleep, again, you are correct. Ano bang ginagawa pag tayo nagsasay? Sigh. Bubuntong hininga po. Ang nakakapagbuntong hininga lang ay mga tao. It's a human characteristic. It's a human attribute. Nakarinig na kayo ng nagbubuntong hiningang kabayo? Wala pa no? So, tao lang karamihan. That human attribute is given to the wind. Ba yung tunog ng hangin parang isang malakas na buntong hininga. Pagdating ng hangin, yan, ganyan. So, at last, the wind sighed itself to sleep. The human attribute of sighing, yung pagbuntong hininga, ay binibigay sa wind, which is an inanimate object. The sun smiled at me when I woke up this morning. Imagine that, no? When I woke up this morning, the sun smiled at me. Yung araw ay ngumiti daw. Smiling is a human attribute. Ang nag-smile ay tao, hindi sun. But that human attribute, that human capability is given to the sun in this line. So pag nabasa mo, when I woke up this morning, the sun smiled at me. See, para bang, sino bang ngumingiti sa atin? No? Our friends smile at us. Our loved ones smile at us. People who like us smile at us. So, receiving a smile from somebody gives us a good feeling. No? Pag may ngumiti sa atin, maganda sa pakiramdam. So that is what we get from this line. Maganda sa pakiramdam ang pagising. Yung pagising ay maliwalas ang araw. Yan. The sun is promising a wonderful day. Yan. The sun smiled at me. Magandang gising. Here's another one. Break, break, break on the cold gray stones, O sea. Break, break, break on the cold gray stones, O sea. I doubt this one, whether this is personification. Break, break, break. Tao lang ba ang nakakagawa niyan? Tao lang ba ang nagbe-break? Glasses can also be broken. No? They can... A dawn can break the sun. No? I am doubtful about this item, class. Let's go back to number 1. At last the wind sighed itself to sleep, and then the examples I gave you. The sun smiled at me. The leaves of the trees waved at me. Yeah. Kumakaway daw yung mga dahon ng mga punong kahoy. Yung pag-wave, yung pagkaway, ginagawa ng tao. And it is given to the leaves of the trees. So personification po ang tawag dyan. We give or we attribute human characteristics to inanimate objects. Then we have apostrophe. Apostrophe. This is an address to the absent as if he were present, or somebody dead as if he were alive, or to inanimate things as if they were animated. Ina-address, kinakausap, in other words. Apostrophe, kinakausap yung taong wala dyan na parang siya ay nandyan. Kinakausap yung isang bagay na walang buhay na parang siya ay may buhay. Milton, thou shouldest be living at this hour. See? This line is a direct address to Milton. Si Milton ay isang poet na namatay na. But in this line, he is being addressed as if he is there, as if he is still present, as if he is still alive. Milton, imagine, address mo, kakausapin mo ng isang taong patay. Thou shouldest be living at this hour. That is an apostrophe. Or, the second one, mountains and hills, come and fall on me. Mountains and hills are inanimate objects. Wala silang buhay. But the writer of this line talks to them as if they are alive, as if they are animate objects. Animate, may buhay. When in fact, they are inanimate objects. Walang buhay. This technique, this figure of speech is called an apostrophe. Ito namang metonymy, one word is put for another, which it suggests. It consists in giving an idea that is so closely associated with one another. Examples tayo. The pen is mightier than the sword. O sige, actual tayong away. Magdala ka ng ballpen. Ako ay magdadala ng sword. Or talibong na lang. Wala tayong sword eh. Magdala ka ng pentel pen para marako-rako. Ako naman magdadala ng talibong. Actual tayong away. Tingnan natin kung anong mangyari dyan sa pentel pen mo. Pero siyempre, alam kagad natin that the writer of this line was not referring to a pen or a sword literally. Ano ba ang gamit ng pen? Diba sa pagsusulat? Ano usually mga sinusulat? Mga aklat, mga kung ano-ano dyan. Yung sword naman, we usually use this in battles. So pen is for writing, sword is for battle, sword is for violence. So pag sinabing the pen is mightier than the sword, mas malakas, mas makapangyarihan daw yung pen kaysa sa sword. Ibig sabihin ng writer, books and other things that are written are more powerful than violence in terms of achieving goals, in terms of spreading an ideology, in terms of advocating a cause. Yan. Hindi yung literal na pen at saka literal na sword. Walang kalaban-laban yung pen. So, pen is used as a symbol for books. Sword is used as a symbol for violence, for battles, for wars. They are very closely associated with those things. Yan ang metonymy. We mention the object that is closely related to the idea, not the idea itself. Halimbawa, gray hair should be respected. Literal ba ito na respetuhin natin ang uban? Ay, ibang ramong uban. Oh, respetuhin na ako ng uban. Mano po uban? Ang ibig sabihin ay yung taong maraming uban. Ibig sabihin, matanda. Old people should be respected. Yun ang meaning niya. Ay bakit hindi sinabing old people? Bakit sinabing gray hairs? Eh yun ang gusto ng poet eh. Mas maganda kung gray hairs. It mas forceful. It conjures up a more impactful image. Gray hairs, uban, maraming uban. Talagang matanda na. Although there are people who grow gray hairs at a young age, no? Pero karamihan, basta maraming uban, matanda na. Mas maganda yung image. Concrete, instead of just saying old people. Mas maganda kung, mas poetic kung gray hair should be respected. Yan, metonymy. Kapag may umakyat sa inyong bahay, may pumunta sa inyong bahay, sabi ng lalaki ay, binata siya, sabi ng lalaki, good evening po, ako po'y naparito para hingin po ang kamay ni, halimbawa, ang pangalan ng babae ay si Isabel. Good evening po, ako po'y naparito para hingin ang kamay ni Isabel. Sasabihin ng tatay, Juan, yung kapatid ni Isabel. Boy, palakol. Ako toyo na to. Damutit mo manang. Ingahagar at kaling tao. Siyempre, alam natin na yun ay figure of speech. Ang gusto niyang sabihin, the man is asking for the girl's hand in marriage. Yan. Hihingin ang kamay. Ang ibig sabihin na hihilingin na mag-aasawa na sila, magpapakasal na. Hindi na, yung kamay lang ang kanyang asawahin. Anong nakatunita? Okay. Antithesis. A contrast of words or ideas. Okay. Magka-contrast. Magpagkasalungat. In meaning, no? The juxtaposition, yung pagtatabi. Juxtaposition of words or ideas that are in contrast to one another. Here's an example. Easy writing makes hard reading. Hard writing, easy reading. Yan. Pinagpalit-palit yung mga words, creating antithesis. Easy writing is the opposite of hard writing in the second part of the line. Hard reading is the opposite of easy reading on the second part of the line. Easy writing, hard reading, hard writing, easy reading. So you see, this play on words, this witty juxtaposition of these contrasting words or ideas creates that effect. No? His body is active, but his mind is sluggish. Active is the antithesis of sluggish. Body, hindi naman eksaktong antithesis, but the body is different from the mind. So, yon, antithesis yon, a contrast of words or ideas. Then hyperbole, some people pronounce this as hyperbole. Narinig ko lang sa prof nung college na hyperbole. The use of exaggeration, not to deceive. Sobra-sobra exaggerated yung pagsusulat. But the purpose is not to deceive. Hindi man loloko, kundi to produce laughter or to make the line more forceful. Hyperbole, exaggeration. Morning, noon, and night, her tongue was incessantly doing. Chismosa, no? Morning, noon, and night, her tongue was incessantly doing. Incessantly. Non-stop, hindi tumitigil. Ano ang gamit ng tongue? Diba sa pagsasalita? O edi hindi siya tumigil sa pagsasalita. Ano siya ngayon? Chismosa nga. Chismis in the morning, chismis at noon, and chismis pa more at night. Yan. Chismosa. Hyperbole yan. Morning, noon, and night, her tongue was incessantly doing. Then irony. Saying the opposite of what... Teka, bigay tayo ng example dito sa hyperbole. Basta yung eksaheradong statement or line. Halimbawa, I was very tired, so I ate my dinner and slept for 3 months. Meron bang taong kayang matulog ng 3 months? Diretsohan ka to. Hindi lang yung tulog, talagang namayapa na. Pero, kan lang yun, exaggerated statement nga. For effect ba? For effect. Para lalo siyang ma-emphasize na talagang natulog siya ng mahaba. Because he was really very tired. Hyperbole po ang tawag sa mga yan. Eksaheradong statement. Then we have irony. Saying the opposite of what is meant in a manner or in a tone that shows what the speaker thinks. Saying the opposite of what you mean. Meron kang sinasabi, pero ang gusto mo talagang sabihin ay the opposite. Para bang yung mayroong gustong mang-insulto sa'yo na ang ganda naman ng damit mo. Nakita ngang punit-punit at marami kasi nagmamadali ka eh. Yun ang naisuot. Tapos ang ganda naman ng damit mo. Bagay na bagay sa'yo. Yun, irony yun. Nakita na ngang punit-punit yung damit eh. So, saying the opposite of what you mean. Maganda yung words pero may pagka-sarcastic yung kanyang meaning. That's irony. Doon sa ating example, irony is not always sarcastic. It was very kind of you to remind me of my humiliation. Kung ita-translate natin ito, it was very kind of you to remind me of my humiliation. Na napakabuti mo, napakabait mo naman at ipinaalala mo sa akin ang aking pagkapahiya. When we remind somebody of his or her humiliation, that's not being kind. So the statement here is an example of an irony. Kung minsan, halimbawa, mayroong lakad ang tropa nyo, then everything is already ready. You're ready to go. And then, halimbawa, picnic or swimming. And then, all of a sudden, it rains very heavily. Biglang umulan ng malakas. Sabi mo, wow, what a perfect day for a swimming. Perfect yan eh. Kusog-kusog tungo yan. You cannot leave the house. You cannot go to the beach. You cannot go swimming. Irony yun. Alright? The short story. Tapos na pala tayo dun sa poetry. So let us just review, under figures of speech, we have simile, metaphor, personification, apostrophe, metonymy, antithesis, hyperbole, and irony. Ayan, irony. That's the last one pala. Kalimutan ko. So we proceed to the short story. Remember, we're talking about contemporary literary types, no? So tapos na natin yung poetry. Under poetry, we talked about the different elements of poetry. The poetic line, the sound of words. The third one is meter. The fourth one is imagery. The fifth one is tone. And there, figures of speech. Yun ang mga subtopics under poetry. Go back to number 2, you have sound of words. Under that, mayroong rhyme, rhythm, alliteration, assonance, and onomatopoeia. Yung limang yon are all under number 2, the sound of words. So yun ang all about poetry. Let's talk about the short story. This is very popular among us, no? Madalas tayo makabasa ng mga short stories from magazines, from books, from all kinds of reading materials. So let's talk about the different elements of a short story. So, kumbaga, ito ulit yung kanyang mga ingredients, no? We put these elements all together, we get a short story. So the first one is plot. The sequence or the sequence of events or actions in the story. Meron bang kwentong walang pangyayari? Sabi mo, pre, halika lang. Meron akong nakikwento sa'yo. Talaga, pre? Anong nangyari? Wala. Sabi mo, ikwento ka. Meron akong kwento, pero walang nangyari. So, pag may kwento, pag may kwento, may pangyayari. Yung mga pangyayari, that's the plot. The series of events that make up the story. That's the plot. Siyempre, pag may kwento, may mga events, mayroong beginning yan, mayroong middle, and end. Yan. Yan ang kwento. It may be just implied or directly described. The beginning contains the conflict which rises to a climax where the story turns before reaching a denouement or resolution. In a short story, there usually is a conflict, tunggalian. Pag walang conflict, walang kabuhay-buhay, walang conflict. So you are not waiting for any resolution, you are not waiting for the solution of any problem because there's no problem. There's no conflict. Your interest is not piqued. No. Your interest is not stirred or awakened kasi wala namang conflict. Anong babantayin ko dyan? Wala namang conflict. So, pag mayroong plot, there's a conflict which rises to a climax, the highest point of the conflict. Then the conflict is resolved. Nasosolve yung problema doon sa kwento, yung conflict. And that leads us to the denouement, yung pagkaka-solve ng problem, pagkaka-resolve ng conflict in the story. So yan. The plot, as already mentioned, is the sequence of events or series of events or actions that make up the story. Yun ang plot. So element siya kasi nga, it is a required ingredient in a story. Walang kwento na walang nangyayari. So yan, that's the first element, plot. Then we have characterization. Siyempre, pag may kwento ka, may characters. Meron ba namang kwentong walang tauhan? Yan, mga characters yan. These are the people, these are the persons involved in the story. The actions will be determined by his motivation, which in turn is determined by his personality. Dahil magkakaiba-ibang tao yan, naturally in the story, they will manifest or show different kinds of behavior. They will have different motivations, they will have different ways of looking at how to resolve the conflict. The character should not be stereotyped. Yung bang nakabox, yung bang stereotype, yung they will behave as expected. No? They will behave as expected. They should have a character of their own, meaning they should have a set of values of their own. They should have a set of attitudes of their own. They should be distinct persons or individuals. Pag buhay na buhay yung mga character sa kwento, we are carried away by the story. No? We can sympathize with them. Pansin nyo kung nanonood kayo ng mga teleserye, sometimes you get carried away and you begin to hate the kontrabida. Abi ko na bang yan? Talaga ugali ko na, bali-bangon ko na. Masisira yung gali ng mo TV. We get carried away by the portrayal of the character. Lalo kung magaling yung mga artista, no? Talagang We are carried away by their acting. We forget that they are actors and actresses, and we are carried away by the story. We think of them as real people being portrayed in a story. Yan, characterization. Kasi meron silang sarili nilang mga personalities, no? So yun, in a short story, there's plot, there's characters. Hindi pwedeng walang plot, hindi rin pwedeng walang characters. Elements of the story yan. Tapos meron din setting, the milieu. Ibig sabihin, kung saang lugar, sa anong time nangyayari yung kwento. In a story, this may be specified or not. Halimbawa, sa mga teleserye, sometimes we know where the story is specifically happening. Kung minsan naman hindi, wala na tayong pakialam because we focus more on the story. But in some stories, the setting plays a very important role. No? Yung environment, the environment in which the characters are moving. In which case, the writer provides details about the setting for the reader so that the reader will have the opportunity to appreciate the story better. If he understands the environment, if he understands the milieu, yung pinaka-lugar nga, yung pinaka-surroundings, the time and place of the story, then we'll be able to appreciate the setting and in turn, appreciate the entire story. Say for example, yung Maria Clara, sa No Limit Angere, we should understand the setting, the time. Paano bang behavior ng mga tao doon? Bakit ang haba nilang manamit ay kainit-init? Eh, ganun talaga during their time. So, theme. So, first, plot, the next characters, then setting, then we have theme. Another element of the short story. Underlying idea that comments on human condition. Kumbaga, ito yung pinaka-central idea, the central message that the story would like to convey. Pinaka-tema, pinaka-paksa. Sometimes we learn a moral from the story. We learn a lesson about spirituality, about values, we learn about the society. We learn about human beings. We learn a certain truth about life. We learn about something. Yung something na yun, that can be the theme of the story. Yung kanyang pinaka-tema, yung kanyang pinaka-paksa. Sometimes the theme is directly expressed or explicitly stated by the author. But most of the time, it's up to the reader to find the theme of the story. Nawawala yung thrill kapag sinabi ka agad na this story is about morality, this story is about friendship, this story is about blah blah blah. Nababawasan yung joy of discovery ng reader. Alright? Two of the most common themes in short stories. First, good versus evil. Yan. Labanan ng kabutihan at kasamaan. Personal evil or dark forces in man's environment, such as disease, poverty, war, alternation, loss, oppression, dehumanization, inherent evil of man. These are very common subjects or topics or themes in short stories. Good versus evil. Usually ang nananalo good. But there are short stories in which this is not resolved. Kung minsan nga, parang bitin tayo, bakit parang hindi natalo yung kontrabida doon? Bakit parang siya pa ang namayagpag later? Ay, baka mayroong ibang mensahe yung author na hindi natin na-gets. No? Bakit yung bida namatay? Ay, may ibang mensahe ang... Parang yung mga sine, namamatay yung mga bida. Sina Rodi Fernandez, namamatay sa sine. Yan. Nevertheless, there should always be a message from the story. Whether it's good, it's about good, whether it's about evil, we should take something from the story, meaning we should learn from the story. We should benefit from the story. So yan ang pinaka-common, no? Good versus evil. Stories about diseases, about poverty, about war, about alternation, loss, oppression, inherent evil of man. Yan. Another one is life processes. childhood joys and fears. Yan, maraming mga kwento tungkol dyan. Our childhood experiences, things that make our childhood wonderful, things that make our childhood traumatic, yung mga bagay na nakapagpasaya sa atin, things like those. Childhood joys and fears. Also, very common among short stories, adolescence. Love stories, friendship, growing up pains. Yan. Losing a loved one, finding new ones, things like those. Yung pag-mature, no? Adults' maturation process, waste and tragedy of old age, stories about old people, stories about death, no? Cycles of life and death, and then stories about change. Life processes. These are very common themes in short stories. Okay, point of view. The point of view is the perspective at which a story is told. Sino ang nagkukwento? Sabihin mo, siyempre sir, yung author. Yung author nga, ang ibig kong sabihin class ay, how do we know what's happening in the story? Who is telling us? Yun bang, how does the story unfold? How do we know about the different events in the story? Yun ang ibig sabihin ng point of view. From the writer or from one of the characters, from somebody else. Iba-iba kasi ang approaches ng writers eh. Okay, let's talk about this para lalo natin maintindihan. So first point of view. The first person point of view. Here, the narrator is one of the characters in the story and narrates the story from his own observation. That's what we call first person point of view. Ang nagkukwento sa atin, although ang nagkukwento nga yung author, yung writer, but we know about the events from one of the characters. So ang nakakarating lang sa reader ay kung ano yung nakikita nung character na yon. Kung ano lang yung kanyang naobserbahan sa palibot niya na ginagawa ng ibang characters in the story. Although it's the author that's writing, but what gets through to the reader, what reaches the reader, is what one of the characters says. Halimbawa, may 4 na character sa kwento, si Juan, si Pedro, si Maria, si Marta. Halimbawa, the story is told at the point or from the point of view of, halimbawa, si Juan. Doon sa kwento, yung nakikita ni Juan, yun ang kinikwento niya sa pinaka-reader niya. Although nga ang nagsusulat ay yung author, bang kulit eh. So, ang nagkukwento sa atin ay si Juan. So, mababasa natin doon sa kwento, halimbawa, nakita ko. Yung ko, doon sa kwento, si Juan yun. Nakita ko na si Pedro ay pumunta sa bahay ni na Marta. May dala siyang manok. ang nakita niya ay si Pedro pumunta doon kay Marta. Yun lang nakita niya. So yun lang ang ikikwento niya sa reader. He cannot tell us that Marta is preparing inside. Kasi nga, based from the point of view of Juan na nasa labas ng bahay, hindi niya makita si Marta sa loob ng bahay. So, mamaya na yun magkakwento ni Juan when he gets inside the house. Kasi birthday pala ni Marta, ay invited sila. So, pagdating ni Juan doon sa kwento pagdating sa bahay ni Juan, pagdating sa loob yun, makikwento niya what Marta is doing, what Pedro is doing, because he can now see the other characters inside the house. So makikwento niya sa reader. Ang tawag dyan is first person point of view. Okay, pag third person naman, the narrator is not a participant in the story. The narrator is not a participant in the story. He is not one of the characters, in other words. He can be another entity. He can be another person. But not necessarily the author. Gumagamit yung author ng isa pang tao para through him ay maikwento ng author sa atin yung story. That's third person. Itong omniscient, the narrator is all present. Yan. This is the best. This is the point of view that represents the author. Kasi pwede siya magpalipat-lipat from one character to another, from one time or from one place in the story to another. So, the story is the author's creation. Halimbawa, ako magsusulat ng kwento, creation ko yan. All the characters in the story came from my imagination. All the events in this story came from my imagination. So I can tell the story whichever way I like. I can create this character any way I like. So, in effect, it's my creation. The people there are the creation of my imagination. So, palipat-lipat ako because I know everything in the story. What Juan is thinking and feeling, what Pedro is thinking, feeling, what Marta. Kasi nga ako ang nagbigay sa kanila ng mga thoughts na yun. I'm the one who gave them those feelings. So I know everything in the story. So I tell the story directly to the reader. That's omniscient. I can transfer from one person to another, from one point of view to another, from one place to another, from one time to another, in the story. Yan, omniscient. So my point of view is not limited to the point of view of one character. Kasi I can transfer from one character to another. I can delve deep into their thoughts. Kasi nga ako nagbibigay sa kanilang thoughts na yun. Character sila sa kwento ko eh. Gawa sila ng aking imagination eh. Okay. Then, we have symbol. Bakit nakarating tayo ng letter F? Kasi ang ating letter E is point of view. Ang ating letter D ay theme. Ang letter C ay setting. Ang letter B ay characterization. Ang letter E is plot. These are all called elements of the short story. Okay, para maalala natin, balikan natin. Elements of a short story. A, plot. B, characters or characterization. C, setting. D, theme. E, point of view. F, symbol. Yan. Yung symbol, this is usually a concrete object or an event. Pwede rin siyang character which represents an abstract idea like love, patriotism, etc. The meaning of a symbol is revealed through the context of the story. Symbol. It may be a character in the story. It may be an object in the story. It may be an event in the story which represents an idea like love, like patriotism, like democracy. Symbol siya, simbolo. So, it's a representation of something else. Magandang example dito siguro is Noli Mitanghiri again. I have read somewhere that Sisa, yung babaeng nabaliw, nanay ni Crispin at ni Basilio, is not just a character in the novel who went insane. She's not just a wife and a mother. She's not just a woman who lost her mind. It is said that she is the symbol of the Philippines in the story. Sumisimbolo siya sa mga paghihirap at mga kaapihan ng bansang Pilipinas sa kamay ng mga mananakop. See? Symbol. Then we have conflict, the last one. Conflict in a story could be the following: man versus man, society versus man versus himself, man versus nature. Conflict. Halimbawa, nag-away ang dalawang tao sa kwento. Ang pinag-awayan nila ay lupa. Yan, conflict yan. Man versus man. Nag-away ang dalawang tao. Ang pinag-awayan ay pera. Conflict yan. Man versus man. Nag-away ang dalawang tao. Pinag-awayan ay another tao. Halimbawa ay nagagawan sa babae, nagagawan sa lalaki. Man versus man ulit. Halimbawa naman ay man versus society. Yung isang tao pinagbintangan ng lipunan na masamang tao. Binilanggo at yan. Ang kalaban niya ay hindi lang one specific individual, but the entire society. Say, for example, a particular person would like to behave in a certain way, which he considers unique to himself, which he considers harmless to other people. Ayaw siyang payagan ng society kasi bawal. So yun, ang kalaban niya ay not a specific person but a society. Man versus himself, yun. May isang taong nakipagsuntukan sa kanyang sarili. Hindi. This refers to internal conflicts. Mental, emotional, spiritual conflicts within ourselves. Yan. Man versus himself. These are certain conflicts within ourselves that we cannot seem to resolve. Internal conflicts. And then man versus nature. Halimbawa, kwento about a person who was trapped inside halimbawa ay cave. Tapos narinig niya na parang magigiba na yung bundok, matatabunan siya. Ang gagawin niya? Yun ang conflict doon. How he is going to save himself from that situation. Hindi naman tao ang kailangan niya, ang kalaban niya, Ang kalaban niya nature, kalaban niya bundok, ang kalaban niya yung magigibang cave. Yan. Man versus nature. Or yung isang kwento na yung isang tao ay inabot ng winter sa isang lugar. He cannot get out of the place. So his problem now is how to survive in this freezing cold. Yan, man versus nature. Maraming mga short stories na ganyan. Okay, last topic tayo. Konti na lang ito, mga kapatid. Let's talk about this. 2 slides na lang. Drama. The drama is written primarily to be acted and seen on stage. Yan. Para madali, dulaan. The printed form is only a rough approximation of what the writer intends to be apprehended by the reader. Yung nasa papel na nakaprint, script lang yun eh. Guide lang yun ng mga actors. Mas masaya kung talaga makikita natin yung actual performance of the drama or the play. Because dramas or plays are really intended to be performed and watched rather than just read. The reader is left to visualize the setting. Sometimes the stage does not have any props at all. Bahala na yung audience na mag-imagine where the characters are, what they are doing, what their surroundings are. Pero siyempre, doon sa kanilang usapan, the audience will be given hints or clues as to where they are so that the reader will not be confused regarding the setting. The reader is left to visualize, recreate the speech of the characters, and assign them movements and gestures. This is what happens when we just read drama from printed page. The reader is left to visualize. Tayo na lang ang mag-visualize, tayo na lang ang mag-imagine doon sa setting kung babasahin lang sa papel. We will also be forced to recreate the speech of the characters, how the lines will be delivered, how the lines will be spoken or read. Or assign them movement and gestures. We will imagine for ourselves how this particular character will move, how this particular character will behave. Kung babasahin lang sa papel. But if we are going to watch a drama or a play being performed, then we would be afforded opportunities for better appreciation of the drama because we will really hear how the lines will be delivered, how the words will be given emotions, how the lines will be given life by the actors, by the players. So, mabubuhay yung drama. The drama, the play, will have its own life, will have its own wala na akong ibang maisip na word. Basta magkakaroon siya ng buhay. Hindi siya basta flat lang on papel, on paper. Buhay siya. Oops. Okay. The drama as a literary genre has been described by playwrights as a dramatic art. It has an emotional impact or force because of the emotions injected by the actors and actresses into their lines. the drama becomes emotionally forceful. It becomes emotionally engaging. It is a visual art because of what we see on stage. No? It's a visual art. The costumes, the props. No? Mayroong mga drama or plays na talagang they use spectacular props. Kompleto sa mga props. And then it's also an auditory art. Dialogue is intended to be spoken out loud. It is an auditory art. In order to really appreciate the drama, we should have the art, we should be good at the art of listening. Yan. Meron nga mga drama, kinakanta yung mga lines eh. Drama. Musical drama. Yan. Di ba yung Lea Salonga noon, yung Miss Saigon. Drama yun, but the lines are not spoken, but are sung. Kinakanta. Sumikat doon si Lea, no? Lea Salonga internationally. Sumikat pati Pilipinas, thanks to Lea. So that's the drama. And that's the end of our discussion with regards to this topic in our module. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much for listening. Goodbye to everybody. Be safe. Stay safe, everyone. God bless you all.